Hello, I'm Brett with WIPDeveloper.com. Last time, we received data from Salesforce using the Lightning Data Service. This time, we're going to take a look at using the Wire service to get data out of Salesforce for our component. Before we get too far, though, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor for this episode, Just Some Apps. They are here to help you get more from your technology investments. Check them out at justsomapps.com if you would like to be a sponsor, or if you find the content I'm creating at WIPDeveloper.com useful and would like to support the creation of more content, you can do so by going to patreon.com/BrettMN. I'll include a link below. Depending upon what level you back at, you can have your name read or included in a blog post and immortalized on the internet. Now, let's get to learning about using the Wire service. To use the Wire service, we have to import it from the LWC collection. So, along with Lightning Element and API, we import the Wire service. The Wire service is a decorator, similar to the API decorator. So we're going to have to use that wire. And this is actually a method. So we're going to add this on to a property that we're going to name user. But this method, we're going to need to provide a method to and some additional details. So first thing we're going to want to do is we want to import an additional, we want to import a method to get the record. So import get record, and we're going to import it from the Lightning UI record API. This one. Now this method, Visual Studio aggressively imported something. We don't need that user. Now this get, we use the get record method as the first property in our Wire decorator. This is what will be doing the work for calling Salesforce with the Wire. It'll work with the Wire service to get the record that we want. So to get the record, we're going to have to provide it with the record ID. So we provide it with the $ID so that the Wire service knows to get the ID property from our instance. We also have to provide it with some fields. Since we want to get the information from the user, oh, I forgot. This has to be all in an object, so have to have it as record ID is passed the ID property. Close out the object so it doesn't get mad about that. Now we have to tell it what fields we would like. Now there are a couple different ways we can get fields. I'm interested in getting access to the data as easily as possible. So I am going to essentially code in the strings to identify what fields to get off the user object. You can import references to the fields of the objects, but it seems beyond the scope of what we're doing right now, and I just want to get the data for use. So I'm just going to grab the username, email, what else should we grab? Company name, and user phone number. Now this is all passed in to this array, or into the fields as an array. And that is all we need for there. There's our object, there's our fields. Now this Wire decorator will populate the user record once the page loads and it has a record ID, or a user ID in this case, because the user ID is still being imported. But how do we get those values to our user? We could try putting binding at the bottom just to see what it looks like. We're going to push this. We've updated our Salesforce. Let's go and refresh it a few times. And a couple of things. It's saying object.object because we aren't picking out the properties we want, and when you toString an object, it just says, object.object. So let's go back in here. I want to change this so it says wire. Yay! But now, rather than what I want to do, I don't want just the user, I want the name. So I want a name property. And to get there, way too much there. Now, I'm going to use a getter on the in the JavaScript to expose the name. So I want this name getter to return the user data dot fields dot name dot value. Now, so once this user object is populated, it's going to have a property called data, and that's going to have a subproperty called fields, and that one of those fields will be a name because we asked for it. And we want the value from that field. So if I deploy these to the Scratch org and refresh the page, that is not what I was expecting. Oh, silly. Put get before the method name. So it's a little odd that it behaved that way, but let's redeploy this. Refresh the page. See how long this takes. Now there's probably going to be an error, and that's why there's probably a delay. It's probably having difficulties evaluating the object. So let's wait a moment and see if it pops up. Doesn't look like it's going to pop up. So what I want to do is here, I'm making a lot of assumptions on the user object that all of these values exist. Oops. So one thing that I was experiencing before is that I was getting an error. Fields wasn't a valid value. So we could, if fields was null or undefined, we couldn't evaluate the name or the value. So just error out. So to get around that, this is the fun little thing I did. Okay. So if the user and the user data and the user data fields and the user data fields name and the user data field, oh, one too many. So if there's a user, it checks to see if there's data. And if there's data, it checks if there's fields. If there's fields, it checks if there's names. And if there's a name, it checks if there's a value. And only then does it return that value. But because this is a getter, we always need to return something. And I'm just going to return an empty string. I know this doesn't adhere to just having one return path, so rather than that, why don't I just have a I'm going to make a return value, and then I will return the return value. So, and I will set this only after all those are met. So, there. Now we have a return value. We have one return path, so you can't necessarily get confused by where the code is going because there's only one way to exit this method. The other thing is, this is only being changed if all these conditions are met. We already went over that, so I'm getting tired of saying, oops, the user.data.fields.name.value. So we're just going to deploy this. Now you see that on first load, it had nothing to, it didn't display the username. I think that is when the error was occurring. Before the wire service had a chance to return anything, it was trying to evaluate it. And because this user wasn't populated, there was no data, and there was no fields, and there was no name. So, a couple null checks, and we are ready to go. But I got a couple extra fields here, so I'm going to cheat and copy some things. Pasted that 3 times, but I know it's going to have a problem. It doesn't want to. So this first one, I'm doing email, and then I will do company name. And then I will do phone. That'll make it have a little less errors. Now for email, I will change all the email name to email. And for company name, I want it to be capital C because that is not the JavaScript way. I'm going to have it checking instead of for name, company name. And for phone, same deal. Change the name to phone. Now I will save these, but I haven't had them here. And then I will add email at the end. There. Now let's deploy this. And you can refresh over here. See all our wonderful values here. There's the name, phone number, company, email address. But because we are using this, and that looks fine. We're just verified that we got the data out. But what I want to do is actually get rid of the Lightning record view form. So I will delete this, and I will delete that. And that is going to cause an issue up here. We're using the Lightning help field. So I'll copy the company name just so I don't have to type so much. Paste it in here, and we also use the Lightning output field here. Paste that in. Not format properly. Save it. Redeploy. Now refresh. And it is no longer using the Lightning data service. It does look like the formatting's changed a little. I think it's because the Lightning output field had a different format to it, and this is being having a header values applied. Not too worried because we're just playing around. So that is getting data using the wire data service and exposing it in our Lightning Web component. That's all for now. Remember to sign up for the weekly stand-up, and you can get updated with any new information we have on WIPdeveloper.com.